I was in the habit of doing things on my own, and I didn't tell my instructors what I was going through. I just felt pressured to finish my training, my jet training, as soon as I possibly could, so I could progress with my other challenges in my personal life. So it just all happened at the same time, and I didn't say anything to anybody. And that obviously hindered the progress, and it made things more difficult for me and for people around me. I was pushing to fly as often as I could to finish my training as quickly as I could. And the instructors didn't like that because they didn't know anything about what was happening with my life. They just saw it as a sign that I didn't have a very good judgment when I should or shouldn't be flying as a student. So yeah, my instructors made the wrong conclusions about my attitude towards the weather and safety. So they thought that I was a bit too daring. So I ended up where I should have started with. I tell everybody, sort everything out. I ended up being forced to do it when I pushed way too hard. And it made things more difficult.
So when you did that second lesson on aerobatics and you were struggling with the aileron rolls and it hadn't gone to plan, I'm thinking about a lot of listeners and viewers who may be overcoming a similar situation where something's not gone to plan and they need to redo it or regroup and then find a new strategy. So what advice would you give? Because it's really powerful what you're saying, that failures, it's just part of the path to success. So what advice would you give to them in that situation to regain control?
I would say never punish yourself mentally for not being to achieve something in the time frame you set for yourself. There is no time frame. Things happen to you in the right time when you're ready. You will get ready when you're ready. And if you stress yourself, it will take longer because a person does not perform well under stress. Nobody does. Particularly as a student, we're forever students while we're learning anything in life. Everybody is a student forever because we're always learning. And as a student in life, you can't learn quickly if you're stressed. Nobody learns well under pressure, so you should remove all that pressure just by thinking that you're a personality, you're different from anybody else, your learning process is different. Just see what works for you and try to learn about yourself, as Neil Williams said. Learn about yourself while you're learning and see what hinders you and see what helps you. If something triggers your stress, try to avoid those situations. And you will feel, when you overcome those things in your brain which hinder your progress, most of those problems are in your mind. Mind is a very great power which we as humans haven't harnessed yet. And that's the main challenge, I think, for all of us as humans, is to harness our mind. And that's where the main challenge is.
I think what you're saying there is really powerful as well, because I know, speaking from my own point of view, it's very hard or very easy to be very hard on yourself and to be a total perfectionist and think, this is the number of lessons I'm supposed to have for my Aeros rating and I haven't met the grade at this point. So I think that's a really key message that you're sharing with us there, is that, you have to be kind to yourself and not beating yourself up if you're not progressing at the rate you want to progress, but actually, you progress at a rate that works for you and you draw on sources of support around you. What did you have many sources of support around you while you were going through your training?
I think books are a great power. I think back then I wasn't very good networking with people and getting the support that I needed from people. I was still learning that. I think I only learned it later than that. So I didn't necessarily have any peer support at that stage. In my family, i.e. my ex-husband, he didn't support me, and I didn't have many friends at that stage of my life. I just had a very young child and a husband who didn't quite like me, trying to achieve something in aviation, which wasn't very easy, and I didn't have many friends. So that was not so easy. But even if somebody finds themselves in that situation, there are books, and books can help if you're going through that kind of stage in your life. And then, obviously, I started kind of coming out of this shell when I realized I had to work with more people, when I got involved with the jets, that's when the fun started. When I realized I had to have all the support I could possibly get from other people, working with other people, with engineers, with other pilots, networking, etc. That opened up my horizons quite a lot. But back when I was still learning aerobatics in Slingsby Firefly, I was kind of on my own. And that's not a very good thing, I don't think.
So one of the things we were talking about earlier was in your training, when you were going through divorce, moving house, childcare, all these life stresses just being thrown at you all at once and major life adjustments, that you paused your training and then continued but didn't tell the instructors as to why you were pausing it. Looking back, would you have changed that? Would you have told them? I'm thinking about this it's okay to ask for help sometimes, and whether that might have changed the support package that they gave you.
I was in the habit of doing things on my own, and I didn't tell my instructors what I was going through. I just felt pressured to finish my training, my jet training, as soon as I possibly could, so I could progress with my other challenges in my personal life. So it just all happened at the same time, and I didn't say anything to anybody. And that obviously hindered the progress, and it made things more difficult for me and for people around me. So I definitely would not recommend to do that. So if you're going through, as a pilot, if you're going through difficulties, or not even a pilot, as a student pilot, as a person, when you're going through difficulties, it's better if you tell your employer, tell your friends, tell people around you. You will get more support, and it will remove some of the pressure you're putting on yourself, because you will get more understanding, and that way the pressure goes away. So that was a big mistake. However, everything happens for a reason to each person, so I wouldn't want it to happen to other people, though, and I would recommend to, instead of putting yourself under pressure and trying to push for flying in more challenging conditions than you are ready for, which I was doing, I was pushing to fly as often as I could to finish my training as quickly as I could. And the instructors didn't like that because they didn't know anything about what was happening with my life. And they just saw it as a sign that I didn't have a very good judgment when I should or shouldn't be flying as a student.
So it worked against you, actually, that trying to push.
So yeah, my instructors made the wrong conclusions about my attitude towards the weather and safety. So they thought that I was a bit too daring. I wasn't too daring because I knew I was flying with an instructor. I was just putting myself under an unnecessary pressure to finish ASAP. And that didn't help me because I did not manage to finish as quickly as I could. It actually made it slower. I ended up telling everybody that I would have to take a break to sort my personal circumstances out before I get back to my training. So I ended up where I should have started with. I tell everybody, sort everything out. I ended up being forced to do it when I pushed way too hard. And it made things more difficult. So in the end, I did resolve the work situation, the family situation. I got divorced, I changed my main job, I moved out and started renting my own flat, which was fun. So all of that got sorted, and I sent this email, which I should have sent months and months ago, to tell everybody, my instructors and my group members, to say this is what I've done, and I'm now in the right state to get back to learning to fly the jet. And they said, "Oh wow, thanks Tetyana for telling us. We didn't realize that's what was happening," and that explains it. However, because it went too far by that time, they said, "You now have got 5 flights to fix yourself and pass the FHT, the flight handling test, to graduate from this course." So I put myself under an unnecessary pressure, and that resulted in them giving me this very short time frame. Luckily, these days it doesn't happen anymore, particularly where I fly now. We wouldn't do that anyway. We wouldn't set that kind of time frame for anybody. You just fly and get trained until you're ready. But back then, it was more, in our group, it was stricter. So I was set a time frame, 5 flights, and either you pass the test or your history, basically. So I passed the test. But it was unnecessarily difficult just because of the approach I took of not telling anybody.
I'm thinking of also actually of a broader context as well, of not just pilots and aviation, but of mental health in general, that it's very easy if someone says, how are you? You go, yeah, fine. And you're not. Yes. And maybe you just don't need to ask for help. So how important do you think mental health is in protecting your own mental health? And sometimes, as you've just touched on, saying no to something.
That's very important. So since then, a couple of years ago, I became mental health first aider, learned to give first aid, and also learned how important mental health is in general and how many people ignore it in themselves. Obviously, if you ignore it for yourself, you also ignore it for other people as well. So the more you become aware of mental health as a thing, a lot of people think of physical health, but they don't think of mental health as a thing. And actually, physical health depends on the mental health. Mental health is where everything starts and ends, just because your mind is so powerful. So you actually have to be very well aware of your own mental health. And that makes you more aware of other people's mental health as well. A lot of people in the world suffer from mental health issues without even thinking about it. And I think this is the biggest problem, is lack of awareness and lack of encouragement to talk about it or to seek help. You can seek help from your family if your family is an understanding family. Some families might not be understanding families. You could try to seek help from your friends, or obviously there are organizations, non-profit organizations, charities who provide that kind of mental health help. Anybody who you can trust could be helpful as well, but just bottling up your anxiety, your the pressure that you feel, your unhappiness causes it to accumulate and get worse. It's like having your eyes closed in my story. If you keep your eyes closed to your own state of mind, it will get worse and it will take the best of you, and you will end up facing more problems than you should have.
And what do you do then to protect your mental health? What are your top tips or your go-tos if you're not feeling great?
I developed a new term called vegetation. So I make myself vegetate. So vegetables and other plants, they normally are quite happy when they can just vegetate. They're outside, they're growing, they're taking sun in, taking nutrients from the soil, and they're happy plants. They don't put themselves under any pressure to grow. They vegetate. So basically, a person is a living being, same as a plant, same as a tree, same as a dog or a cat. And humans put themselves under necessary pressure coming from their mind to achieve some targets, some things that they literally invent for themselves, and which dogs, cats, and trees don't do. So I teach myself to learn from those other living beings to just vegetate, enjoy the sun, enjoy the good food, a good drink, a good sleep. And that's very important to keep your mental health in a good condition. When you allow yourself to sleep the hours you should be sleeping, 8-9 hours, that has to be, obviously pilots don't always get that luxury, but you have to make an effort, a conscious effort, to get that sleep, to get the food you need, to get the drink you need, to get this human connection you need from your partner or from your family or from your child or from your friends, from your peers. That's why I always say network, have friends, open up, so you can get what other living creatures get and humans often don't get.
So it's about finding simple pleasures, sunshine, walk in the countryside, that you find helps you maintain good mental health.
Right, exactly. For different people, it's different things. So for somebody, it would be reading a book or sunbathing. For somebody, it would be a little beer. So just understanding what makes you more relaxed and what removes pressure from you, after which you walk out and you feel refreshed. That's what you should be doing. It's just about learning about yourself, what makes you relaxed.
And also not putting unnecessary or unrealistic expectations on yourself, like, you know, with the 5 flights to get through your training.
Right. Again, you are your own judge. Nobody is judging you, and you shouldn't be a tough judge on yourself. Basically, you are the person who is the only person who puts the pressure on you. You learn when it's the right time for you, and you learn quicker when you're not stressed. And therefore, you should just not put yourself under pressure. And if other people try to put you under pressure, you should try to remove it by talking to them and explaining what works for you. For example, if you're flying with an instructor whose teaching style does not coincide with your learning style, you should bring it up. Because everybody has got their own learning style. Some people are pragmatists, some people are theorists, some people learn in different situations better than others. And not all instructors realize that. So the instructor does not read your mind. You have to open up your mind and tell them how it feels when they instruct you, if it's not working for you. You could tell your instructor, look, it works better for me when we have a longer brief. Or you can say, it works better for me when I follow through on the controls. I often had to mention it to in my later learning, when I realized that that's the way to do, to learn. If I learned some new aerobatic maneuver, I would say, look, I learn better when I follow through. Can I follow through? So sometimes an instructor would not know what works for you best, and you should say it.
So with regards to instructing and your training on the Jet Provost, so first of all, why the Jet Provost? What made you decide to fly that beautiful aircraft?
Well, it was just life, basically. I didn't know anything about Jet Provost at that stage. And then I have to tell this bit of the story. I think it's to do with fate, or having a path that everybody has got, their own path that they're destined to walk, which they have control over. One day when I was still getting my PPL, we ran out of fuel at Stapleford. So my instructor said, I will fly to North Weald and get fuel. So we flew over, about 3 minutes flight, landed. North Weald is a very historic World War II airport, and with lots and lots of aviation happening there, lots of historic aircraft, etc. I didn't know anything about it. So we landed there, and he said, go to the squadron, it's a historic squadron, and have a look. There's so much memorabilia there, it's great, and I'll refuel the airplane. So I walked in. It was fantastic. This squadron with lots of memorabilia from World War II, and brilliant. Anyway, I saw this advertisement there about training pilots to fly a de Havilland Vampire ex-military jet. That they would train students to fly an ex-military jet, and you could be a PPL to learn that. I never knew that was possible. So that was like learning on a B-52, basically. So when I saw that, and the de Havilland Vampire looks so weird. I've never seen something that's got 2 booms. I've never seen an airplane like that. I didn't think that an airplane could actually have 2 tails back then. So it was, I just was, shocked and inspired, basically. When I called them and I thought, here I am, I'm ready, I paid off my debt, I've got my PPL, I learned aerobatics, and I called them, and they stopped training at the time because it was the last T11 and they didn't want to risk training accident back then. I then thought, oh no, that's a big setback, what do I do now? So I tried to find if there is another ex-military jet that you could learn to fly in the UK. That's how I found out that there is Jet Provost, and I found a couple of groups where you could be trained to learn to fly one. So I found the cheapest one, and I approached them. And it's quite interesting. The person who talked to me, he wasn't an instructor, but he was the owner. And I didn't know back then. He did not want. He wanted to take new members, but those who would not want to become a fully self-authorizing pilots to fly the airplane. I didn't know any of that. So basically, he was very happy to take me on. But then when he asked me, what do you want to do with the airplane when you graduate and or after you learn, I said, well, I want to become a self-authorizing pilot, meaning take passengers, become a display pilot, do air shows and stuff like that. his face suddenly changed and he wasn't happy anymore. So about a week later, he then said, sorry, we can't take you because I believe your arms are a bit too short to reach the opposite wall of the aircraft while being strapped in very tightly to the aircraft. When you're told you're not good enough for one reason or another, whether it's a physical reason or some perceived reason, you can't make it and you haven't even started, and you feel like you've got a lot of potential, don't just take it for what you think it is. It could be something different. People just might not want you there. They might not want to work with you for one reason or another. Go elsewhere. People in another place might be happy to assist you to get to where you want to be. It's like being a woman in aviation or situations like that, or people don't want to work with you because they have a perception against you for one reason or another. It's not necessarily their fault that they don't want to work with you. It's not your fault for sure. It's nobody's fault. It's just go elsewhere, and there are opportunities in other places. The game is not over, but that's how it felt for me at the time. That really was probably the saddest day of my life, which is really weird, because I had this big dream to fly a jet. And suddenly, well, you couldn't be trained on the Vampire, and suddenly I was told by one of the two groups in the Jet Provost that they can't take me for one reason or another. And it felt like my dream was over. And I was so sad. And I was sitting on the grass, and it was interesting. It was at an air show, and the pilot who owns the Vampire actually came up to me. I was just given this news that I can't join that Jet Provost group. And the Vampire pilot was actually displaying the Vampire at that air show where I was given that news. And he came up to me and said, why are you so sad? And I said, well, I was just told that they won't take me into this group to fly the Jet Provost. And he said to me, don't be sad. If it doesn't work out with the group at North Weald, come to fly the Vampire. I'll let you try. Despite us not taking trainees, he said, I'll give you a chance. And suddenly the world got its colors back again for me, and the life was not over. So I called the group at North Weald, the group that I'm currently in, and they were very generous. So I have to tell this story. It's awesome. So they said, oh, you want to fly Jet Provost? I said, yes. They said, oh, do come over. We'll meet and talk about it. So I came up, and here was the main owner called Mike. And he said, oh, Tetyana, you want to fly our jet? He was the majority shareholder in it. I said, yes, please. He said, yeah, of course you can. No problems whatsoever. When do you want to start? And I said, well, ASAP. Unfortunately, I don't have any money to pay for my training. And he went like, so how are you envisaging this? I said, look, I will just pay for my fuel. I can only afford to fly once a month if I'm lucky, because I just can't afford to pay for jet fuel. I won't be able to really afford to fly to pay towards the aeroplane. I will contribute towards the hand garage. I will pay £200 a month or £300 a month, something like that. But then I'll make my career, and when I make my career progress, I will have more money and I'll start paying for the aeroplane. And he went like, that sounds like a deal. I couldn't believe he actually accepted me.
So what do you think persuaded him then to accept you?
There was an underlying reason for that.
Okay.
It was so funny. In a few years, Mike actually did tell me why. He said people would rock up and say, I've got the money, I can afford it, I'll pay for the aeroplane. So they would start flying, pay this monthly fee, £300 towards the hand garage and the brakes and tires, and then fly a lot because they could afford their fuel. They would do 50 flights or whatever it is they wanted to do. And then when the annual maintenance comes and a huge bill arrives, absolutely huge, they would say, sorry, Mike, my wife is divorcing me, my auntie passed away, I lost my job, I lost my house, I'm in a big trouble, sorry, I can't pay for the aeroplane, and they would walk away. I was the very first person who turned up and said, I'm not going to pay for the aeroplane. And he went like, at least she's not going to fly that much. So he would always have to pick up the bill anyway. And he was really sick of it by then, because it was like 10 years it was going like that. He would always have to pick up the bill and people would just fly at his expense. And here this girl comes up and says, sorry, I won't pay Mike, but I really, really want it. And when I can earn it, I will actually start paying for it. So he thought, well, I'll end up paying for it anyway, so I might as well take her and she'll keep the aeroplane flying, once a month without actually doing 50 flights and then walking away. And in the end, he was right, because I started doing everything that needed to be done for this aeroplane to fly because I felt guilty. So what I did is I started helping with everything that needed doing. If it was cleaning, if it was finding spares, if it was liaising with the maintenance company, doing the paperwork, doing compliance for the CAA, anything that needed doing, I would do it. So aviation actually helps you, even if it's not your main career, it helps you to progress whatever your career is, because aviation bills tend to be huge. Whatever aeroplane you fly, they tend to be huge. And that really helps you to raise your standards and become really ambitious and just smash it. So, and it's not just the only thing that I became more ambitious, but also aviation kept my mind learning quicker, becoming more efficient. I became a project manager. So I was a software developer. I became a project manager. Then I became a business process manager. Then I became a software architect. Then I became this and this and this. So I started developing my career just like that, because I was just, my brain got faster because I started flying fast airplanes. So you had to react faster. I managed to start not ignoring problems when they arose, and I was actually noticing when other people in the company would ignore problems. So I would come and say, there is a problem, we have to fix it, this is how we fix it. We shouldn't get stressed about it, we should still take our lunch break, we should still go out, we should still have fun, but we'll fix it today, we will not wait for it to go away. That way I got appreciated in the companies I worked for because I kept resolving the issues they had. And in those 5 years, a lot of people left this Jet Provost group, so I became compliance manager, airworthiness manager, and everybody else walked away. And from 5% shareholder, I suddenly inherited the whole thing, basically. So
that's an incredible story, though. Also, I like what you were saying just a moment ago about how you've used skills you've learned in aviation and applied them in your life outside of aviation, and how it's helped you to take control of your life outside of aviation to actually get where you want to be.
Yes, and that's what aviation does to everybody, I think, if you allow it to happen by embracing it, basically. Aviation can be tough. It challenges your brain, so your brain has to evolve. It's quite funny, our CFI is an ex-Lightning pilot, and he used to fly at 2 Mach speed. And I can spot it very quickly how his brain works in everyday life. He's like 2 Mach ahead of everybody else. So I actually often watch him to see, when he goes to the pub, for example, how his brain is way ahead of everybody in just daily life. It's incredible to watch. And aviation does that kind of thing to your brain and helps it evolve, helps it become faster, solve problems. You become a better problem solver. And I noticed that a lot of problems that you perceive as a problem on the ground is actually not a problem.
So something you touched on just then was decision making. So are there any kind of tools or strategies that you use in decision making that maybe you've learned from aviation, but you now use them in your life outside of aviation, which helps you project this calmness, like you were saying just now, in the workplace?
Yes, I guess the main tool is you have to be calm. When you're calm, there is no hormones are thrown into your bloodstream to make stupid things happen, basically. So the first thing is you have to be relaxed and you have to do what you have to do. In aviation, it's very structured because you've got checklists. As long as your team is calm and you are calm, you have a good chance of survival because there is a checklist for it. People have been through it. People tested the situation. Somebody went through it, and you're not the first one to deal with it. So there is a checklist to help you to deal with it. So that's what makes it easy in aviation to get through a potentially challenging situation in a structured and non-panicky way. And outside of aviation, people don't have those checklists. Sometimes it's a good thing, but sometimes it could be a not so good thing, and mistakes happen where they shouldn't have happened. So I often, what I use in my IT job is I write checklists. So I say, why don't we come up with a process? So when we had an issue in the IT world, when something stopped working, I said, how about we put a process in place, how we stop this from happening next time? Nobody else suggested it because they don't fly airplanes, but I felt like, well, there has to be a checklist there. what do we do and why it happened, etc., how we prevent this from happening again. So we write a process, then we adhere to that process.